It's a Tuesday edition of the McShay Show. We got a fun one lined up today. First of all, we want to do this project, right? Everyone evaluates Travis Hunter, the Colorado Star, Heisman favorite right now, as a cornerback / receiver. But if you look at history, it's probable that he's going to have to choose one position. So I tasked my guy Muench, go study him as a cornerback. I tasked myself, study him as a wide receiver. We're going to give you an evaluation on Travis Hunter, both positions. We're going to separate it and talk about where he could wind up in this NFL draft. In addition, asked and answered. We're going to debut this segment. We need more feedback on this show. We talked about it the last couple of weeks. We need your questions. Sent out a tweet, an X post, whatever you call it. Got a lot of great questions. We're going to get to a handful of them today. I'm going to make that a consistent thing on the Tuesday, Thursday show. And then finally, the Bear, my guy. I'm so excited to have Chris Felica, who's now with Fox. He's got Bear Bets, his podcast. He's going to join the show. He's going to talk to us about all things gambling, college football, previewing the game he's going to in Columbus this week, Indiana versus Ohio State. It's a monster matchup. And also just go through the college football rankings and we'll preview the college football playoff and what we think the rankings should be. Mensch, it's going to be a fun one, man. It's week 13 in college football, week 12 in the NFL, and just 156 days until the NFL draft. Mensch, you good?
I'm good, man.
All right, play those tunes, man. How was your assignment? How'd it go, Mensch?
I mean, when you're watching a guy like Travis Hunter, it's pretty easy, right?
Not bad, right? Not
Feels
bad.
like stealing. It's not work anymore.
So I just mentioned it. I feel like everywhere I watch, everywhere I listen, everywhere I read, it's when we talk about the 2025 NFL draft, it's always Travis Hunter, wide receiver, cornerback, right? But I was going through this, Mensch, right? Charles Woodson, one of the best two-way players in college football history, won the Heisman, monster final year at Michigan. Do you know how many receptions he had in 18 years in the NFL?
0?
2.
Okay.
Another guy, Champ Bailey, phenomenal two-way player at Georgia, special player, right? Played 15 years in the NFL. You know how many receptions he had?
More, right? I don't know, though.
Yeah, he did have more. 4.
Yeah,
Okay.
4. He doubled up, just like I thought, man.
Nailed it. And then Deion Sanders, who's obviously Coach Prime, who's coaching Travis Hunter. They're basically family, right? I think might be the most applicable combination. When we think of Deion, we think about the versatility, not just football and baseball, but in the NFL.
The return.
Well known in the return game, which is no longer the thing that it was back in the 90s, or So, but his value at wide receiver was there, much more so than Woodson, much more so than Champ Bailey. He had 60 receptions in the NFL, primarily a corner, one of the great all-time return guys. But is that a route in today's NFL that's going to factor into the evaluation for Travis Hunter? No. But he did have 60 receptions in the NFL. But the interesting part with it, like Champ and Chuck and Charles Woodson, they played both ways in college. Deion didn't. Deion, I went and looked just to double check to make sure I wasn't wrong.
Right.
Deion at Florida State did not have a single reception. One of the all-time great return men and obviously a phenomenal corner. I think he's still in the top 5 in college football history or Florida State history, I think, with 14 interceptions, I want to say. I forget what the number was. But
it was 13 or 14, yeah.
Yeah, my point is that Deion didn't play both ways in college and had more receptions, but still was only 60 receptions. So very limited impact. So with that as the backdrop, and with Travis Hunter being 6'1" and 185 to 191 pounds is what I've seen the range for his weight.
Right.
With the shoulder injury he had earlier this season, with the nicks and bruises and missed time he's had over his career, not massive, not huge,
right?
But conditioning, does he have it to do it in the NFL? Yes. But skill-wise, can you as a player commit to a position and be elite at that position while also doing it on the other side of the ball? History has shown us it's no. The answer is no. There can be an impact, but it's not going to be the impact that he's had at Colorado. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I tasked you and tasked myself with let's treat it as separate entities. Like when we're evaluating players on tape, it's the helmet, it's the jersey number, and studying them, what their skill set is. Who are they at this position? Right?
Right.
So let's separate Travis Hunter and pretend almost like he's two different human beings, two different evaluations. Who is he as a corner?
Right.
Who is he as a wide receiver as it pertains to the upcoming NFL draft? And we broke down the traits. We're going to go through this year's wide receiver and cornerback class. We're going to go through last year's and try to place them where we think at each separate position. So the floor is now yours, Muench.
Yep.
You evaluated him solely as a cornerback. And I want to hear and obviously I've studied the tape as well. You've studied the wide receiver tape, but for these purposes, I'm going to let you're the area scout. You're the cross check. You're coming into the GM's office and you're going to break down what he is as a cornerback. Right. And so that's where I want you to go and tell me what you think of him.
So the first thing when I look at corners, I want to see them in press. I want to see how they match up one-on-one in press. And no surprise here, considering who he plays for. He is a fundamentally sound press corner who is physical. He's lean. You mentioned it, but he's physical. He's tough. He can make it hard for guys to get off the line. He can turn and run with guys. He can mirror receivers' release. So right away, he can match up and press. The other thing I want to see is how are the ball skills. And you're going to get into this as a receiver. I'm guessing you gave him elite ball skills. Did you give him elite ball skills? Yes.
I gave him
if he has an elite ball skill grade at receiver for McShay, he's going to have elite ball skills for a corner.
No question.
And, what's interesting to me is I went back and I want to see every interception a player makes in the year. He has 3 so far this year. So let's go back and look at the 3. The one he had against Colorado State is beautiful. Runs the route for the receiver, snatches the ball out of the air. The 2 other ones I think really talk about the next trait that I want to talk about, which is our instincts and recognition.
And if just to interrupt you real quickly, if you're watching this on YouTube, watching the video podcast version of the podcast, you'll see here, this is his cornerback specific traits. We do this for every position. We've done it with the quarterbacks. You'll see it wide receiver later, but these are the cornerback specific traits. First one, instincts recognition, most important. And people overlook that. They want to see the length, the speed, and all those things are critical. But the best corners in the NFL, the guys who translate the best, have elite instincts and recognition typically. And just ripping through this, and you can go in more detail, but you've given him a grade of 1, meaning that's elite. 1 is elite, 2 is above average to good, 3 is average, 4 is below average, 5 is marginal. And you've given him the first 3 traits: instincts and recognition, a 1, elite. Cover skills, 1, elite. Ball skills, 1, elite. Run support, 3, average. So go ahead, pick up where you left off.
So I'll just, looking at those 2 picks, there's one from Utah, there's one from UCF. We'll talk about the Utah because it just happened this past weekend. He's not making a one-on-one play, but what he does is he disconnects from the receivers that he's covering. He tracks the ball. He stays in the play. I think this is about Travis Hunter as a football player, by the way. Mm-hmm. He's not just a talented kid, man. He's a really good football player, I think, who loves the game. He stays involved in the play. He easily could have just stayed on the receiver that he was covering, but no. He disconnects from that receiver, tracks the ball gets deflected, pulls it out of the air. There's another interception. UCF game. He's sitting there baiting the quarterback to throw that ball. He is just staring down that quarterback and then explodes off his back foot and makes this great diving catch. Kind of, again, all these things lead into one thing leads into another. Can he play other systems than just a press corner? Is he just a press corner? No, he could play zone. He is just as good in any of those other looks that you want to give him because, again, his instincts, his ability to read receivers, his ability to read quarterbacks. One of the most impressive things about this, Todd, from when we were at Richmond, when you play in college football, they come in the week of the game, and I'm sure it's the same in the pros. I didn't play in the pros. They come in the week of the game, and they throw a 20-page game plan in front of you. Yep. This is who you're going to face. He's good at this. He's bad at that. This is the look we expect to see the formation. I, as an offensive lineman at Richmond, had a hard enough time absorbing that and having Frank Leonard all over me about it. I can't imagine playing 2 positions and having to have a game plan at 2 positions at that
the wide
level.
Receiver, the install for each week. Yeah.
I cannot imagine. I think it speaks to how intelligent he is as a football player.
I agree.
It's something that cannot be overlooked. Yeah,
I completely agree. To further your evaluation, ironically coming into this year, I kind of always thought it like cornerback was his primary spot.
Yeah.
Wide receiver, he was just relying on athleticism. And we'll get to wide receiver. I think there's more polish to be done at corner in terms of like technique and certain things that you need at the cornerback position than there is a receiver, which was surprising to me. I wrote down in my notes, I think he's at his best, actually. He's not a physical tackler. I think, and you put that in your breakdown of the cornerback specific traits. Mm-hmm. When you look at 3 run support, significant drop off from all the other traits there. I don't think he's a great tackler. I do agree that it's kind of this, not a contradiction, but it's interesting in that at 185 to 191 pounds, he is physical in coverage. And most importantly, he's at his best in press, but inconsistent as a tackler, not great in support. You know, some of the things you see out of with the Jets, having
Sauce Gardner.
Sauce Gardner, right? Sauce Gardner. It feels like it keeps getting worse. But I think Sauce is kind of. I'm not saying this is the NFL comp for him, but I'm saying some of the frustration that Jets fans have with Sauce is that he's great in press, great in one-on-one. He'll blanket your number one guy, and let's face it, that's where you make your money. But there's been so many plays and so many missed tackles that have led to big plays for the opponent. And you kind of see some of those issues there. His lack of size and the tackling issues are concerns. Only 185, 191 pounds.
Yeah.
And durability, because at receiver, you're going to take hits. At cornerback, durability, like the shoulder injury we saw against Kansas State, right?
Right.
Durability is going to show up to me. I'm more concerned at cornerback than I am wide receiver. And now if you're talking about playing both and playing 120 snaps or something ridiculous, even
over an 18 game after 17 game season
against
and
grown ass men every week
Yep.
and getting targeted and having to go initiate that contact with your shoulder, you know, like that's concern. The durability is more concerning at cornerback than it is a wide receiver. So where are you at a cornerback? I mean, we can look at this year's class. We can look at last year's class. If you're following along in video.
Yeah, we got the graphic right here for last year's class. First of all, can I just say this? How in the world
did the
Eagles get those 2 players at those spots?
You didn't even have to.
Quinyon Mitchell should have gone. I think he was like the number 7, or he was the number 7 player on my board, I think. Yeah, no, he's the number 10 player on my board.
Yeah, we go with 22. We both had him in the top 10 to 12. Spots.
Yeah, to go at 22, come on. I actually like Hunter better than Mitchell, though, to be honest with you. Mitchell had an unbelievable lead up to the draft. He's playing really well now. Yeah, I do. I think because
you like Travis Hunter as a cornerback prospect more than Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah, I have a slightly higher grade on him. Yeah,
interesting.
I do.
Okay.
I think they're right there. I think they're in the same conversation, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So yeah, I would have him slightly ahead. If you look at the year before, the guy that he kind of reminds me of that was the 8th player on my board that year was Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon.
Yes.
Who's playing for the Patriots now. He's got that kind of a vibe.
And kind of similar complaints living here in New England, like unbelievable in coverage. He's almost surpassed the expectations, and the expectations were high in coverage. But the missed tackles.
Also missed some time last year, I think, with a shoulder injury. Interesting enough. Obviously, that's not an apples to apples thing. But he just reminds me of.
Go ahead.
So yeah, and then if you're looking at this year, there's a lot of. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, ironically, like we go back sometimes in years, and we're going back to 2024 and 2023 to try to stack them to give a perspective on where they are. But interestingly enough, like I would argue if you put the 3 cornerback classes together, Witherspoon was 2023 and he was picked. Was he 5? He was 5 overall.
I think he was. Yeah.
By Seattle.
Yeah. He was 5th overall.
But I would argue Will Johnson And I know this year he's kind of,
Yeah.
He was a little up and down early, had a couple great games, hasn't played a lot recently.
Yeah.
Has he checked out?
Remember we talked about Derek Stingley like that?
I was just going to say Derek Stingley.
He's all right? I think he's
doing just fine. Doing just fine. I think the Texans are okay with that. So,
yeah.
But Will Johnson, I would argue, is up there. I'm not going to sit here and say Will Johnson has a better grade than Witherspoon. Like, we're not there yet in the process, but he's up there with the elite cornerbacks from the last 2 drafts. So I think it's all like, now let's, in your opinion, based off of Will Johnson, all the tape I know you've studied, if I told you there is no wide receiver, Travis Hunter,
right?
It's just you get a cornerback who, maybe will give you 2 catches like Charles Woodson, or 4 catches like Champ Bailey through his career, or even 60 over a more than a decade career like Dion. So if I were to tell you you're just getting the cornerback Travis Hunter, is he higher than Will Johnson in your opinion?
No, I still have Will Johnson. I mean, this is how good I think that Will Johnson is.
I agree. It's not an indictment on Travis.
Not at all. I mean, this class is good. I mean, you look at Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, and like these 3 corners, and there's questions about all. We just
highlighted Jahdae Barron from Texas.
Yeah,
how great
you're looking at the top of this class. There's some questions because of injuries. Even Revel out of East Carolina, looked like he was going to be that Quinyon Mitchell kind of arc where he's just going to explode this year. He's going to test super well. He's got some good tape. He's another guy to get to keep an eye on. But getting back to the Will Johnson, a little bigger, a little more physical, and I think that's kind of what separates them more. I think he's a little bit of a better run defender. Same kind of instinct, same kind of cover skills. I see almost the same kind of plays from him. And when you look at that UCF pick, Will Johnson does that really well. I think he had a pick 6 early in the season on a similar play where he's like, no, you got that guy. You can throw it to him, and just explodes off the back foot, and you're going the other way. So Will Johnson, I think, is an elite corner prospect. I have both of those guys in my top 5 overall, by the way.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, this is a class that I think could be, could compare to 2022 when Stingley, I think, went 4 and Gardner went 5 or something like that. They both went very early. And I had Gardner ahead of Stingley at the time. It hasn't really worked out that way recently, but I think it's a similar class.
All right. So that's him as a corner.
Yeah.
So we're talking potential top 5 pick as a corner, second cornerback in this year's class, stacks up with the top corners that we've seen in the last 2 drafts.
Right.
Let me clear my throat before we.
It's silly.
I think he's a better wide receiver prospect than corner prospect.
I agree with you, and I agree with you all that, about not seeing it coming into the year. I thought that was his second position. It's cool that he can do that.
It was going to be a great add-on, and maybe we get 20 snaps out of him at wide receiver. I think when you look at, let's get into him as a receiver first. Let's start here. Okay. Let's throw up the graphic for the wide receiver position specifics. I went 2 on routes, meaning above average good, but not elite. And I say that, and I want people to hear this when I say it. There's no wasted motion. He doesn't have to gear down to get in and out of breaks. Smooth and crisp as an athlete. Accelerates to top speed in a flash. Really threatens you as a cornerback. So he has all the traits to be a great route runner in the NFL and create separation with his feet and quickness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's still room for some polish. I think there's still room in terms of like an NFL route tree. I'm not saying he's not running it, but there's a lot of screens and drags and like just kind of getting to an area. I do love his instincts versus zone, like finding soft spots, knowing, working back to his quarterback, which I think he's improved upon this year. I didn't think he was always great at that last year. But I give him a 2 because, and again, couching it a little bit, he's really quick and crafty getting off the line of scrimmage. I don't think that's going to be the issue, but what I watch consistently too often, let's put it that way, defensive backs that are able to get their hands on him and kind of muscle him out of his routes, take him off his track. Right.
Right.
And I think that that's a problem that's only going to improve with continued, bulk and strength. Without losing speed and explosiveness. He's got it. I think he's strong for his size, but he's got that lean, lanky frame. Looks a lot, like Garrett Wilson when you watch him, like so great in so many areas, but there's too many times where you feel like he's getting muscled a little bit when the ball's in the air. That kind of separating him from being like he's one of the elite receivers in the NFL, but from like taking that next step. I think when you study Travis, if he can improve his size and bulk and strength and be more sturdy as both a route runner and when the ball's in the air, kind of contested catches, I think that's an area he can improve. But you see the rest of this ball skills, one, elite. Like I don't see many body catches on tape. I see a guy. What separates like the 2 grade versus the 1 grade for me, guys that are able to pluck the ball and already know what their first move is. It's like this focus on the ball, but like the body's moving while the eyes and hands are still right.
It jumps out when you watch him. It's like that's when you're trying to explain to someone that trait, you want to show Travis Hunter. He's the teach tape.
It's a hand-eye coordination that's different than other guys. There are plenty of receivers. We see double catches. We see ball getting to body. We see fighting it at times. We see they really have to like go secure it. The elite guys, it's like, yeah, I know I have to complete this process, complete A to get to B. Yeah. But it ain't that hard for me,
No.
So, that's why I give him elite ball skills, big playability. I think his lack of elite size and elite strength, like down the field, he gets muscled around on some of those jump balls and all that. But in terms of his run after catch, that when the ball is in Travis Hunter's hands, that's when he is a special, different football player, period. He does a lot of things great. Travis Hunter does a lot of things great at wide receiver. He does a lot of things great at cornerback. But when that football is in Travis Hunter's hands, that's when he's different, man. And he also has the speed to get over the top. So big playability while, his numbers don't jump out and all of that. And he doesn't have like 3 deep ball catches every week. He is a weapon on offense.
I couldn't agree more.
And then go ahead.
Sorry. When we talk about those instincts too, one of the things I really like about him is the way that he attracts and adjusts downfield. And there's something that I've noticed about his game, to get into the weeds a little bit here, is he is leaner. You're right. He's got to get some more body armor, a little more durable. He's got to get stronger, so he's better in those 50-50 situations. But he does win 50-50 balls. And the reason I think is because of the way he tracks, the way he can adjust while the ball is in the air. And he's really good. And North Dakota State would argue that he got overly physical on some of those routes. Too bad it wasn't called. He does a really good job of moving defenders and getting inside leverage to get to a ball without extending. And that is an instinct. That is not something. It is when you are moving at that rate, teaching a player how to do that. I don't know how you can do it. That is something I think
you either have it or you don't.
You don't, right? And he has it. He knows how. He'll like use his hands to move a guy, but never get caught fully extending. And it's just another element of the instincts, of the ball skills. It all kind of wraps up when you're looking at a player as a whole. But just something, again, that's jumped out to me that I think is super impressive.
Yeah, I'm just going down my pros and cons. I watched 3 more tapes. Last year, I watched every target that he had from 2023. This year, I picked 3 games, Nebraska, Arizona. I also had watched a lot of tape getting ready for doing this Shador tape. So, like, it was some repetitive. And then this past week as well, Utah. So some of the notes I wrote, like, and we've covered a lot of it, but just ripped down, like, explosive with ball in hands, best trait, reaches top speed quickly and elusive. I put an exclamation next to stop start. Love his stop start ability, right?
Yeah.
Versatile. I love the fact that, like, you don't even, it's not like an event when he's playing inside or outside. He's just like, he's playing inside or outside. He's playing the left side or right side. Plays on the right, probably a little bit more on the left. I don't have the numbers, but he can play both sides of the field. It's not like he's pigeonholed to one thing, just an outside receiver, just a slot. He's just, they move him around. Creative getting off the line of scrimmage. I told you that, just how so quick he is. And also he has a plan. It's not like guys who are just like, he has a plan. He knows how he's going to get out, and it's a different plan frequently. Smooth and efficient routes, not many wasted steps, great instincts versus zone, which we covered. Hand plucker, can climb and adjust That's something I didn't talk about. Climb and adjust. He's got vertical, man. You see it, and it's easy vertical. It's easy
the
speed,
timing,
and
all
easy
of it.
vertical, and then speed to get over the top. Now the cons, two things, and one's nitpicking. I'll just get it out of the way. My goodness, does he need to tuck the ball away sometimes? And he's gotten away with it. I don't
do it.
I don't have his fumble numbers or anything, but like I see on tape sometimes where I'm just like, but it speaks to his instincts. He knows when to protect it, but that he will not get away with that as frequently in the NFL. But much more importantly to his evaluation as a receiver, he needs to improve his play strength. It's the same thing at corner and wide receiver. And we just talked knocked off routes, struggles on some contested. That's where he's going to have to improve if he wants to take his game to another level.
Right.
So with that as a bet, go ahead.
Can I address the X trolls that I'm guessing may respond to this video?
Yeah.
Or this pod is I know that Travis got beat over the top against Utah. I know that happened. I felt like there was a couple plays and a couple balls in the Texas Tech game that he could have got and he didn't come down with. He is not. It's important that these are not perfect players. They're like the tape is. There's going to be plays where they're not at their best. He got caught flat-footed and off coverage. I don't think that's the best look for him when he got beat over the top against Utah. Maybe peeked into the backfield. I'm not overly worried because you don't see it a lot. One bad play, this is we're always looking at the body of work.
What can he be?
Right. So
and this what makes this a unique evaluation, Bud, is we're studying this tape, and this is why I wanted to do it, where you just go and evaluate him as a corner.
Right.
And I go and evaluate him as a wide receiver. But the thing that I didn't even think about that I'm thinking about now is when I go evaluate Teteroa McMillan.
Yeah.
When I go evaluate Luther Burden for Missouri, or Isaiah Bond for Texas, or Jalen Royals for Utah State, some of the other wide receivers in this class, when I go evaluate them, I'm not thinking about, they also played 68 snaps on defense today.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I was doing it, I wasn't even conscious of the fact, he's wearing down. He doesn't look like he has a which is unbelievable.
Unreal.
Because I'm watching plays in the third quarter or early in the fourth quarter where he's played over 100 snaps in that game. And so because the scouting process is this. The area scouts and you break up for every organization. You break up area scouts, Northeast, Midwest, West Coast, Southwest, Southeast, and how different teams kind of do it differently. Then you have like a top 100 scout typically, right? And so it's their process. And they get, sometimes I call scouts in April, and they're like, I'm not even I'm done with my meetings with the team. Like I'm on to next year's class. So it's 13
Crazy.
months, and obviously it goes beyond that, but 13 months focus on these players, but they start the evaluation. They get it go. They bring it to the team. Then they have cross checks, so now if I'm in the Northeast scout, I'm going to cross check and cross checks are done by position. So we'll talk to a Northeast scout who's done that whole region all season long, who now is in charge of wide receivers and offensive linemen, or whatever those two positions are. And so now there's a second check. But then at some point in the process, when the NFL season is over, the coaches get involved.
Right.
So the general managers overlooking it, the college scouting directors overlooking it, they're building up the report. They're getting all this information in and starting to stack the board. But then the NFL coaches get involved with the organization as we get to the Senior Bowl, as we get to the combine. And so when I think about those meetings, and I think about cornerback, defensive back coaches banging on the table, because you got to remember, they're going to be like, no, I want Travis as a corner. And then there's wide receiver, coaches banging on the table. And I can hear them now in those meetings that we have 100 amazing stories of the yelling, the screaming, the fighting, the bickering, the backstabbing. But I mean, come.
No, I know.
If we could share any of those, we could do 10 podcast series on them. How many amazing stories.
Bravo would make a show out of that.
So, but I can hear the receiver coach now being like, hey, can you imagine what I can do with him if I just get him as a wide receiver?
Yeah.
And he's not, his mental focus is not on both positions all week. And his physical focus is not on both positions. And then in game, he's only playing 60 snaps for us versus 130 or 140 and so. That's when it's going to get real interesting. And I say that because you're always evaluating the entire picture as a prospect, and you're always having to push the conversation forward. What can he be?
Right.
And to me, like the what can he be is so intriguing because you can take half of his workload off his plate.
Yeah.
And you can bring him in.
To tie into that.
Yeah.
You see all of those things, right? I agree with everything you're saying. It all makes sense. It's all true. This is a dude that turned down the FBS to go play for Coach Prime at Jackson State because he felt Coach Prime was going to make him the best football player that he could be.
Yeah.
All these kids are like, oh,
I think Barstool threw in $1 million for it, if I remember correctly.
Whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All these, tell me if I'm wrong. That
you're not wrong.
Wouldn't have given $1 million. That all these other kids are. What Power 5 school you going to? You're going to Jackson State? Really? You're going to go to Jackson State? He turned down the FBS because he felt like this was going to be the place that made him the best player. That's why, when you hear Coach Prime talk about this kid, I mean, you understand why when you look at the arc and the relationship and the way it's developed.
There's a commitment to one another that is very unique.
It's one of the best stories in college football in my mind.
Yeah. And so I look at this and I think to myself, all right, so when we get to that process, because we just told you the numbers on Charles Woodson, Champ Bailey, even Dion, who probably was the most prolific both sides of the ball, just 60 catches in his long career, right?
Yeah.
Teams have got to look at this. Which one is he playing? And I just keep going back. First of all, not that this necessarily matters. A cornerback has never been drafted number 1 overall.
Right.
But you also got to go back to Keyshawn Johnson's the last receiver selected with the top overall pick, and that was 1996. Okay.
Yep.
The wide receiver position, we just threw up a graphic here. Last year, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas. That was a really good class. You get all the Xavier Worthy, what he's done with the Chiefs, Ricky Pearsall, who obviously got shot.
Yeah.
Like just an unbelievable story. The fact that he's back on the field and has his first touchdown catch a couple weeks ago. To me, it really comes down to I would still have Marvin Harrison ahead of Travis Hunter. I would have Malik Neighbors. It would be right there where the discussion would be. Absolutely ahead of Rome, absolutely ahead of Brian Thomas and all those other guys. So,
by the way, love Rome Odunze. Love Rome Odunze. Again, let's keep this in perspective. That's how good this kid is.
Right. So the discussion for me, we weren't working together last year. I had my little sabbatical, we'll call it. But I had Rome Odunze one notch ahead of Marvin Harrison. So, and both with like exceptional grades, and they both had great seasons in different regards and all of that. But I think he's in that category. I would probably put him just the tiniest notch below those two guys. But also remember, that's pick 4 and pick 6, Harrison and Neighbors, respectively, in a draft that had Caleb Williams, in a draft that had Jaden Daniels, right? And so this year there is like Shador, his teammate is probably going to be the first quarterback off the board, but we'll see how, and
first
we've
overall,
already done the show on that, and we'll do many more on where Prime, is that the Raiders? Let's look at the draft order right now. Okay. Yep. Jacksonville's picking at number 1, not ironically, but interestingly enough, cornerback and wide receiver, top 2 needs. If the draft were held today, Tennessee has a number 2 pick, quarterback. In my opinion, they may not agree. They may want to have a longer leash on Will Levis, but wide receivers outside of quarterback, their number 1 need. Cleveland, quarterback, but then wide receiver. Vegas it seems like the most likely landing spot for Shador. But if it's not quarterback, it's wide receiver. It's going to be quarterback in Vegas. You got to believe. And then the New York Giants quarterback, you've got to believe too. This is going to be fascinating when we get to the quarterbacks. But my point is, you look at all of those teams: Jacksonville, Tennessee, Cleveland, Vegas, Giants. If the draft were held today, the top 5 teams picking quarterback is a top need for all four of them, with the exception of Jacksonville at 1. But after that, it's wide receiver and or cornerback as the next highest need. So he's going to one of those spots. And if you go back to last year's class with those quarterbacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Caleb Williams, with Jaden Daniels, with Drake May, the receivers got bumped down just a little bit, but only for quarterbacks.
Yeah, still three in the top 10.
And so
three in the top 10, yeah,
3 in the top 10, and wide receiver was 4 and 6. And so even if you have him rated just a notch below those top 2 guys, we're talking about him going somewhere in the top 5.
Right. Let me ask you this. You're the GM for the Cleveland Browns, and Coach Prime and Travis Hunter and their team are looking at what Ohtani's done with the Dodgers and the Angels. And they think, look at this like phenomenon in pro sports. And we want Travis Hunter to play both ways. We want him to take the Ohtani route. And we're going to go to a team and say, if you're taking him, we expect him to play on both sides of the ball. How does that affect your thinking?
I love the Shohei Ohtani comparison.
Right.
And the reason I love it is because I think it shows the modern day athlete, modern day sports medicine. I think quarterbacks
He's actually had a hard time staying healthy a little bit, though.
He has. And so the quarterback staying healthy into the 40s, like, well, the entire league is protecting them to a point where it's beyond frustrating for a lot of people who love this game.
Right.
So I don't think you can factor that in. I hear what you're saying, and I think it's fascinating.
Right.
But I'm also then, as the general manager or as the owner talking to an overzealous general manager, I am going to go back and say, I want to show me his injury history.
Yeah. The medical is going to be big. The weigh-in's going to be big. Is he
and I don't
really
even think he
185?
has. I don't think there's anything in his medical history you're worried about being something that's recurring. I know it's not, but I also know
time, but nothing
I also
big.
know that when you've got a shoulder injury this year, like that's going to only be accentuated, heightened, if you will, at the next level. So, and here's my thought too. And we're just free flowing here. I love this conversation because it's so unique, right? Like this one university, Colorado, is providing us with 2 storylines that you almost never see in the NFL draft. You go back, we're talking about Dion. We're talking about Champ Bailey, Charles Woodson over 20 years ago, right?
NFL royalty.
We're talking about Keyshawn Johnson as the number 1 overall pick, 1996. We're talking almost 30 years ago, okay?
Right.
Then we're talking about Shador. We just said on the other podcast the other day, we said it had been 20 years, right? 2004 was the Eli Manning draft with Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, right? 20 years. So we're talking like decades for all of these storylines, and Colorado, coming out of Boulder, Colorado, these unbelievably unique storylines. So but my thought on this is, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to throw it out to you. I feel like if you're going to play cornerback in the NFL, that's got to be your primary, and throwing you in at wide receiver with a handful of play installs every week in a very specific defined role each week is how you do it. I don't think you're a full-time wide receiver and you come in for 15, 20 snaps a game at cornerback and do that. And maybe I'm wrong, but it'll be fascinating to see how these NFL teams that know a lot more than you and I, have a lot more resources than you and I, how they view it. But to me, it's all right. If we're going to try to do both, we got to get cornerback right. Because if we don't get cornerback right in terms of his technique, his polish, strengthening him up, bulking him up, and having him out there as the primary, like taking away the number 1 receiver every week.
Yeah.
If we don't get that right, it's a freaking train wreck.
Right.
2 or 3 big plays a game could change an entire game. At wide receiver, we can kind of pick our spots. So if you're going to try to play him in both, it's got to be cornerback primary, wide receiver secondary, and kind of increase his role over time. Do you agree? Disagree?
I do agree. I think it's really hard to play corner part-time. I mean, it's what you're saying. I think it's really difficult to play corner part-time. On offense, you can have packages and you can have, certain plays installed that you can really focus in on 10, 12 plays a game that he can do. Defensively, I think it's a little bit of more of a different animal. So yeah, I do agree with you. I do hope that and we don't, I mean, tell me if you know something I don't know. We don't know that that's the route that they'll take. There's no reason to believe that's the route that they'll take, that they say that he needs to play both ways. But I hope there's not a GM out there who thinks that they're going to take Hunter and then try Coach Prime and that team and be like, no, actually, we're just going to play him at receiver now that we drafted him. Because all the drama, for lack of a word, or entertainment that's going to go on with all of this is just going to be, it is going to be fun to watch.
Let's just wrap it up here. Unlike last year's class, we just talked about 3 quarterbacks going very early. Unlike most year's class, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to wind up picking their spot, and it probably will be somewhere in the top 5, but we got a lot of time between now and then.
Right.
But when you look at it, and we just talked about, no cornerback has ever gone number 1 overall.
Right.
Keyshawn Johnson in 96. So what is that, 28 years since a wide receiver has gone number 1 overall? I do think the wide receiver positional value is higher than it's ever been in the NFL. So It wouldn't shock me. But when you start talking about the number 1 overall pick, and again, as of today, it would be the Jacksonville Jaguars, but any of these teams picking at the top, and they may have a quarterback need. They may want Shador, but they may not be allowed to get him because he'll hold out if they draft him. So the potential to be the number 1 overall pick, all right, who are you stacking them up against in this year's class? Throw in some names if you want, but I'm just looking at the board, and we haven't even had these meetings yet or discussed this, and you're doing your own board, I do my own board,
right? And
that's just the way things are right now. But Will Johnson at corner would be up there among the names that potentially could be, top 3-4 players in the draft. Abdul Carter, Malik Williams, the edges, Penn State, Georgia, respectively, I think you would have to include up there in this year's class. Beyond that, I know Mason Graham, you absolutely love him.
He's not going to go. That's a whole other argument.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Kelvin Banks, some people think is great. I don't see a number 1. You know what I mean? So I
don't see
the offensive tackle out of Texas.
Yeah, I don't see.
Then we're getting into guys like Malachi Starks. There's not going to be a safety go. So that's kind of it this year. There's a lot of depth in it. A lot of damn good football players in the 2025 draft. And I'm not just saying that to keep excitement going for we'll shoot straight here. I don't mind. But when you talk about a typical top 5 class where you've got guys fighting at the end, trying to get climbing up 40-yard dash, who worked out best, who had all those, who had the best Senior Bowl. I don't see a group where you've got a bunch of guys that truly belong as the number 1, number 2 overall pick. And if you were to compare them to other years' drafts,
couldn't agree more.
So the reason I'm saying this is he very well could be the number 1 overall pick. Travis Hunter very well could be the number 1 overall pick as a wide receiver or as a cornerback that can also contribute at wide receiver. And if that's the case, we're talking about making history at corner, which I think it's more likely to be wide receiver, or it being 28 years since we've had a wide receiver taken number 1 overall. And for a class that doesn't have elite prospects at the top like we normally have, that's a pretty cool storyline.
That's amazing. And I don't want to, so I'll instead of I always put you on the spot. I feel like I'm always like, well, would you take him first overall? I don't know if I would take him first overall right now. We really do have to see how this plays out, because the edge defenders, I think, positional value, I think, and again, we'll see how the rest of the season goes and how everyone tests. But you're right. There is there is more of a chance for a corner to go, or a receiver, whatever you want to call them, to go first overall than we've seen. And I don't even know how long.
Decades.
So, yeah, it's amazing.
Let me wrap it up with this. And I looked at this up earlier in the year. I don't know that any corner has been paid. But Jalen Ramsey, when I looked this up earlier in the year, was the highest paid cornerback per year in the NFL, $24.1 million per year.
Right.
There were 12 wide receivers at the time, and I think it might be more now. 12 wide receivers at the time making more annually than Jalen Ramsey. So if you're talking about Coach Prime, you're talking about business decisions, you're talking about advising, and deciding where he's going to go, just like he's going to try to decide where Shedeur goes. You got to believe the push from Travis Hunter's camp is he's a wide receiver.
Right.
And if you want to use him at cornerback, that's fine, but he's getting picked. Now, the rookie contract is a rookie contract. It's a 5-year deal as a first-round pick. And if you're the number 1 overall pick, I haven't looked it up like the last, but it's around $38 million guaranteed.
Yeah.
But if they want him to get paid, like 30 plus million a year, whatever the numbers are after that first contract, and negotiating it, 4 years in, it's going to be at the wide receiver position.
Imagine if this was the old days and they didn't have the fixed contracts and what this would look like.
Oh gosh.
Oh man, that would be fun too.
Well, they'd be pushing to pay him as a corner and a wide receiver.
Yeah, right. They'd be negotiating before the draft, trying to get the deal done. Yeah, I mean, this
is fun.
Yeah.
Colorado providing us with 2 of the best storylines we've seen in 2 decades in the NFL draft. And it's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out.